Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this edition of the Packard Network Live special edition. We're doing it on a Monday right now. And I'm really pleased to have a special guest here that I'm sure you'll agree after our 1 hour conversation is quite unique and quite an elite performer. For those of you that follow me mainly on LinkedIn, you'll understand that is really my big focus is bringing stars from around the world to this program so that you can pick up some tips from people that have actually done it and performed very well in the first decile category. So today I have Briar Dougherty, who's the CEO of Career Organics. She's coming to us live from Atlanta, Georgia. Briar, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, great. And Briar is a published author, a writer, a speaker, a strategic advisor. She loves basketball. Maybe that'll come up today. We'll see about that. And we're going to talk a bit about with all of her experiences. We're going to cover several of them that around leadership, culture, and adversity, how they actually feed into the preparation of an elite performer, and how going through those experiences is quite a bit more effective than picking things up through textbook, because most of these experiences are not taught, they're learned by doing. And Briar has certainly done a lot of that in different places and that type of thing. Briar helps she's dedicated to helping professionals make career transitions. She covers the end-to-end process of helping people find jobs or transition from one job to another job or make a career switch. You kind of name it. She's got things covered pretty much 360. And we're going to talk a little bit, I promised a bonus when we announced this. We're going to talk a little bit about the ATS, or applicant tracking system, which I am not an expert on, because I'm more of a dinosaur that had to interview for my first job in 1980 in the 1980s, and then I got phone calls for all of my subsequent jobs, so I didn't really have to apply anywhere. But in today's world, as many job seekers have found with technology, this applicant tracking system can either be a barrier or a tool to gaining employment. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, as well. Briar speaks, teaches, and mentors across the international markets. Those of you in my network that are watching this would know that the majority of people are in Asia, spread across 12 different countries, which is reflective of where I worked, and a bit less so in the Middle East, Africa, and Europe as well. But Briar does work across international markets, so she and I have that very much in common, and understand culture and differences in that arena. And she left corporate America in 2013 to start a solopreneurship. And we'll talk a bit about how she wound up where she is today. So with that, one clerical matter for those of you that are tuning in live, please do let us know where you're tuning in from, and I'll be happy to give you a shout out. And more importantly, please feel free to tee up any questions that you have for either Briar or myself as we're having this. Don't hold back. I think that this is a professional community, so you can certainly ask anything that you'd like, and we'd be very happy to step in and hopefully help you save years with something that you're doing. That would just really make both of our day if we could do that. So please don't hold back on what you want to ask. So you couldn't ask for a better deal than that from a great library. So anyway, Briar, I'm going to take a sip of water here. Welcome to the program again.
Thank you again.
Yeah, fantastic. Good. Okay, so Briar, why don't we start out by, if we could maybe go back to, let's say, high school, junior high school, you can pick it. And did you, I'm sure you had dreams like I did, like everybody does, but did you ever dream that you would be doing what you're doing right now? By the way, she's in Atlanta, Georgia. I think I may have failed to mention that. So did you ever dream that you would be doing what you're doing now?
Yes and no.
Okay.
So my dad is currently a chiropractor, runs his own business, and he was doing that when I was a kid. And so we had lots of conversations about
Mm.
just owning your own business, being your own boss. He really enjoyed that piece of his career and having that ownership and kind of stake in the game on when
Hmm.
he could work and take off and some of those flexibilities that come with it. And so I did have that dream of, how could I become my own boss years later? Did I
Hmm.
ever think I'd be running a professional development company and teaching teams and professionals, how to write resumes and how to apply through the ATS and how to interview and understand their career transitions? Probably not. If I think
Hmm.
back, I actually think my initial dream was to write greeting cards for Hallmark. Super avid writer, loved all of
I
that.
love that.
Yeah, it was a huge dream of mine, and I think my mom didn't like that dream as much because I constantly was like pilfering through the cabinets and taking cotton balls and all kinds of weird stuff from the house and making cards and then writing them.
Wow.
So I was probably a big pest in the grocery bills for that kind of thing. But owning my own business was on that list. I just didn't know what the vision was going to be.
Hmm. That's fantastic. So just gonna pause here for just a second. Welcome some people that are in the program. We have Will Sullivan here. Hey, Will, from New York City, and Briar spent a lot of time in New York City, so she'll be talking about that throughout. Will, thank you
Yeah.
for joining. We have Gary from Birmingham in the UK. One of my favorite countries. We have Ambreen here from Saudi Arabia. Ambreen, thank you for taking the time to tune in this evening. Your time is kind of getting late there. Appreciate that. We have Teresa here from San Antonio, Texas. We have Padre here from Ghana. Africa is one of my favorite places in the world, and it's great to have you, Padre. Thank you so much for coming. And I think I kind of have everybody that's indicated, but we have about 20 people that are watching. So anyway, thank you all. And again, we appreciate you coming to the program. Please do tee up any questions as well. Happy Monday, Teresa, as well. So Briar, so tell us a bit about your journey from let's say entering university to taking a step into corporate America for the first time. Kind of what your mindset was and how you wound up doing what you were doing.
Sure. Well, it was kind of one and the same. So I moved from rural Pennsylvania. So I was living in the Poconos, and my parents were both from New York. My dad was from Yonkers. My mom was from Peekskill. They moved to Pennsylvania to raise their family and start their business. And so now I'm backtracking and coming back to New York, and I was extremely ambitious. And so I worked throughout high school. I worked at my dad's office. When I didn't think he was paying me enough, I left and worked for a pizzeria. I loved having my independence. That was really important to me. And so the first week in college, and I went to FIT, the Fashion Institute of Technology. And so I moved into the dorms on 27th and 7th. And I was like, this is boring. I'm going to school. I've got these like 15 credits, right? So 5 classes, 3 hours each. And there's so much more time to be filled. And so I went out and I got a job. And soon enough, didn't feel like I was getting paid enough and wanted to get another job. And a girlfriend in class, this is my first year, girlfriend in class said, hey, my boyfriend is hiring someone for the front desk at this gym. And high school was all about living in gyms. I was like one of very few females that was in the weight room because I was training for basketball and was thinking I was going to play college ball because I was getting recruited. So I loved the gym, loved it. And so I interviewed there. I got the job as a front desk worker and started very quickly working full-time there. and doing full-time credits at college, and really worked my way up so that by the time I was graduating college, I had my own club. I was a general manager. So I literally went from front desk to MOD, which is manager on duty. Then from manager on duty, I went to assistant manager, assistant general manager, and then general manager. And I was the assistant general manager at the largest Crunch Fitness in Manhattan, and it's Lafayette. So this super cool vibe. And then I was given my own club, which is the Soho location right above Houston Street. And it was a blur if I think about my college years, right? So at one point I was taking 21 credits. I'm working full time. I babysat on the weekends for extra cash. I mean, I was a maniac. When I think about it now, I'm like, how did you fit all of that into 24 hours in each day?
Right.
And so my college years were about me really building my career, not getting ready for my career, which is interesting because a lot of the individuals and professionals that I work with, at the early career stage, this is really their first jumping off point. And I kind of did it all at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, that's fantastic. And you must have been, I'm just guessing, the youngest to have your own club at that point.
I was. Right? I actually had a couple of different firsts or just rarities. One was I was the youngest. So I was 20 years old when I was promoted to general manager.
Wow.
And I do remember, because I remember I was 20 because we had a holiday party and I had to get a fake ID in order to attend. Right. And my staff didn't know I was 20. Everybody thought I was like 25, 26. And I was extremely young, right? But I was also only one of two females. And so that was very interesting that I was a minority in this big group. And, as men, a lot of them were Hispanic. And so I learned how to speak Spanish almost fluently. I was able to communicate. It up-leveled what I could provide as a professional and an employee, but it also helped me not get complacent, where I wasn't one of many. I wasn't like a part of a group. I was proving myself constantly in this group and looked down upon because of my age, because of where I was. I was super fit. We're working in gyms here. So we're working out along with running the club, super fit. And I think it was interesting for me because being a female general manager meant, like my personal training staff really had to respect me, right? I couldn't be walked all over or else my members would be walked all over. And back in the day, we had to watch out for sexual harassment. We had to watch out for all of these protocols. And so I'm a very young, kind of naive female and had to learn very quickly that, you can't go drinking with your staff. You can't tell them what's happening in your personal life. Like you can't share those details because you need to create those boundaries to create a good relationship at work that creates a relationship for your clientele. And so,
did you learn? Yeah, if I could just ask a question there, because I think you're talking about a really important point around making boundaries. And did you already know that, or did you learn that?
Oh, I learned.
If you did learn it, did you learn the hard way?
Not in a really awful way.
Okay.
But I wasn't like a big drinker. I'm not a big drinker. It's just never been in my life. So I was never like a party animal when I was like in high school either or going to college. I just never had that phase. So I didn't go out to like, get drunk with my team, but I felt like I needed to be a part of those conversations to fit in, to gain their respect. And I learned probably over the course of 2 to 3 months, my lesson. It was that when we got back into the workplace, those boundaries were no longer there. And they would either bring things up that I spoke about personally that weren't appropriate to be talking about, whether it's in front of a member, whether it's in front of a new staff member. And so that was my big lesson is, hey, I can't maintain this. This is very stressful. If my team thinks that they're my friend, it didn't mean I wasn't a nice boss and I didn't help and support them, right? Because I'm a coach today. And so I learned that kind of throughout my career. But I really, I didn't like the stress and the anxiety that was bringing. And so I realized very quickly, I have to stop, and that's my team, and they can go out and party together. But I'm not going to be there.
Right. And you mentioned these were mostly males, correct?
Large percentage. Yes.
Yeah. Large percentage. Yeah.
Yes.
And that's a challenge. And I asked that question for a reason, just because it's important, I think, for women to hear stories like this, especially at a younger age when you're in situations like that. And I think you've just shared a lot of wisdom that other women managers that are new to that position, hopefully they can pick up on your learning and apply it with their situation, right?
Well, and I also have I have a funny story about that, though.
Sure.
So because we have large personal training staff, and primarily it's male, and that was, again, when I was working in health and fitness, can't account for what it is today. But every new personal trainer, when they came on board, I wouldn't talk to them. So I'd say hello, and that was about it. They had to work with their personal training manager in the club, who reported up to me. And for the first 60 days, and I calculated it, like I put it on the calendar, first 60 days, they did not get anything from me. They always had to go to their manager, because I wanted to create that relationship. And I remember this personal trainer, he was super young, probably a year or two older than me. And he was every morning, hey, how you doing? And kind of this suave persona toward me. And I was extremely cold. And, hey, why don't you, if you have a question, go talk to your personal training manager. We're done. And I would walk away. And he really thought I was a nasty person. And at the 60-day mark, I was able to talk to him. It was like, oh, what do you need? And I remember I literally can visualize this conversation. His face lit up and he was like, why have you been so mean? And I said, well, you were new and you needed to learn the hierarchy in the club. And you've proven yourself, you're working well, you're, doing what you should with your clients, and you escalate accordingly. And he was like, how about that? But I remember having to set that regimen up, and it worked so well, because my entire personal training staff they were just really, really professional, really helpful. And they were a part of the team. They weren't just isolated, which at other clubs you'll see, they kind of stay to themselves versus working with the team. It's interesting.
That very interesting. And that's a great example of teaching. Great leaders teach by doing, right? And by their actions. It's not just kind of a word game, right? So maybe words are important, but actions, people really are watching what leaders don't say, in addition to what they say, but most
and the consistency,
what they do, and the consistency, right? So I think it's great to live by that as well. So while we're kind of on the track of boundaries and that type of thing, just before we do that, I want to welcome to the program Jasmine, Jasmine, thank you. Jasmine's from Sweden, and thank you for taking the time to tune in. And good evening to you. And we have, I hope I can pronounce this right, Asulana is here as well. Not sure where from Nigeria. So terrific to have you here as well. We have Africa well represented. We have Daniel Hall from Maryland here in the United States, and we have my friend Regina Hutchings, who's a wonderful lady from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So Regina, thank you for tuning in as well. So Briar, while we're talking about boundaries and that's some great learning that you shared here. Let's talk a bit about adversity. One of the things that I think those tuning in would like to pick up some pointers on adversity. There's always adversity in the real world. There was when I was working in corporate America, when you're working in corporate America, today in corporate America, and even in entrepreneurship, solopreneurship, et cetera, we're always dealing with adversity. And I need not remind everybody watching this of the pandemic, which is kind of a big thing that happened, a big shock that happened from an economic perspective, in addition to just the tragic impact on humans that the pandemic has had as well. But my point is that adversity is always going to be there. And could you maybe tell a story or two about when you're in your younger years? Because I think this will benefit a lot of Generation Z and Y, both managers and non-managers, to kind of hear maybe this part of your journey, how you've been able to deal with adversity and how you've learned from it, and now how you can apply it in the real world. Maybe you could just tell a couple of stories about what you went through at a younger age.
Sure.
As it
Sure.
relates to
I have one good one from high school,
Sure.
and I have one from my career at Crunch.
Great.
In high school, so I started playing basketball at 6th grade. I was what they call the animal. That was actually my nickname in high school. However, I was really good. I was a number 4. So I was a forward, small forward, and could box out. I was very aggressive, very quick on my feet, agile. And I went from 8th grade ball and got kind of recruited up to play varsity. And within 2 games of being on the varsity team, I was then put as a starter. And I was the only freshman that was only on varsity. So all the other freshmen that were brought up that were on varsity were also on JV. So they were kind of doing both roles. So I was only on the starting bench of varsity. And so one, it made me stand out to my peers, and some were extremely supportive, and others were just a little, annoyed or didn't understand what I had done differently to be there. And then additionally, when that second game came, and after that game, I remember the coach telling me, "Hey, next game you're starting." It meant that I had kicked a senior off the starting roster.
Oh.
And that did not, it didn't go well.
No.
So I was an extremely nice person. I want to appease people. And that was really my early years, was wanting to appease everybody. And so I didn't want to rock the boat. I just wanted to play basketball. And so I got a lot of just nasty things that happened. Someone stole my number was 34. When I played 8th grade ball, I loved Akeem Olajuwon, Houston Rockets. I looked up to him. I loved his hook shot, and just anyway.
I loved him too. Okay. Amazing.
So 34, I'm like, yes, I'm this forward, and I'm gonna bring it home. And every grade, it went from top to bottom to pick your jerseys, and we got brand new jerseys, and someone above me picked my number. And they knew it was my number. It had not been their number previous years. And it's like those little things that just kind of wanted to chip away at either at my confidence or my being. And I learned, not through anything, just how I approached it was, I'm here to play ball. I'm not here to help you feel better about what's not going on for you. And not from a sassy place, but more I'm going to go in. I'm just going to go inside me. I'm going to do what I love doing. I want that passion to come out. And basketball was a passion for me. And so I just stopped listening, and I stopped letting it affect me emotionally, because, you think about teenage girl. I mean, it's like the best time to feel like everybody's hating you. And I had to just kind of think, hey, I'm doing what I need to do. I'm not doing anything to anybody. and really have that conversation. And it was a candid conversation to have at like 15, 16, and 17, is you're not hurting anybody. That's their own demons that they need to deal with. You're doing what your coach is asking you to do, and that's to perform.
Right.
And so when I got on the court, I didn't think about any of it. And when I got off the court, I did what I needed to do. I showed up to practice, I cheered on the team. And by my senior year, I became co-captain of the basketball team with another team member. And I had earned the respect of the team over those years. And that was, I don't know, it was a huge movement for me, saying, hey, if you're quiet, I didn't cause a scene. I didn't create more drama than what was already there. I didn't perpetuate it. And I just kind of let it move on. And that to me was super powerful to go into the next phase of my career, where I was a young general manager. So it really paired me up.
Absolutely. And so let's just hit the pause button right there, because you have touched on something that I talk about a lot, that my clients are always asking about, is how does an elite performer block out whether they're playing sport, whether they're in business. So let's say that there's a bump in the economy, inflation, right? Costs are going up. So let's kind of view that as that kind of semi-bully that took your jersey number. Are you going to take that with you on the court? Are you going to take that with you to practice? And you just gave an example at a young age that no, you're going to block that out. So this is the point I want the audience to get. It's not a matter of just focusing. It's consciously deciding what not to focus on.
Yes.
And as one of my LinkedIn friends, Faye Ware from Melbourne, Australia, often says, she said last week in a post even, that don't carry those bricks with you. Leave them at the door and leave the other bricks at the other door. Get on the court, play, or in your business, find out a way to offset the cost increases if it's inflation, but just don't get weighed down by what other people are doing. Your competition, if you're in business, don't get distracted by what they're doing. Be aware of it. You need to be aware of the market, but don't take your eye off of your customers, which a lot of businesses do. And then they become obsessed with the competition and they wind up losing their customers, and then they want to know why. So Briar, that's a fantastic share that you did at a very young age. So good. Tell us.
What I learned though is that it's outcome based, right? And so, you know, as a business owner, but also as someone who's kind of gone through these different trials and tribulations in my career, I always, whenever I felt overwhelmed by either the emotional tax or just not being able to connect with the people around me because they weren't, you know, aligned or wanting the best for me, because my next story will definitely go into that. I realized that if you focus on the outcome that you want, you can see a very clear path to how to achieve that, right? And it doesn't mean you know all the steps, but you know how to take that next step because you know where you're going, right? And so even in my business, like it's interesting because I know we'll get to this at the end, but it's super relevant for right now. When I work with my writers, so we have resume writers on the team, we have career coaches. And so if I'm working with one of my resume writers and they have a question about a client and they're like, oh, well, they want, you know, all of these different things on their resume. It's my question back to them is, well, what's going to get them the traction that they've come to us for, right? So what's the outcome? It's that they want what? Okay, they want a new job in a new industry. Well, then we need those keywords on there. So you have to explain that this has to happen to get that outcome, right? So we know how to have conversation. We know why we're doing it. And if we don't do that kind of grunt work, then it's very hard. So like to give a tangible, you know, for anybody listening, it's not just that I was like, oh, I'm going to, you know, focus on not letting that bother me. I had to understand why.
Right.
You know,
Exactly.
because I wanted to play basketball. I wanted to enjoy my life. I wanted to be a happy teenager. Those were the important pieces that I was striving for. And so every decision I had to make or every comment I had to not listen to was in that regard. That was the focus.
Invaluable advice, Briar. Thank you. So folks, for those of you tuning in, this is one of the key differences between a good performer and an elite performer, is finding a way to block out the things, finding a way to make sure that relevance is added to your arsenal. Briar just gave a great example of in the resume business. So if somebody wants to put all this stuff on the resume, but if that's not going to make it through the system, we'll talk about that in just a little while, then you have to question, is that resume going to be elite or not and achieve the objective? Do you want to put the stuff on it, or you want to get the job? That's really what it comes down to.
Right.
And that is one of the key differences between a good performer and somebody that lives in the first decile, which is what a lot of people aspire to do. Tell us the next story.
So before I became a general manager, when you go up the ranks, as I said, I became an assistant general manager, and it was at the largest facility in all of Manhattan.
Yeah.
And I had a general manager above me who was super bitter that I was so young. She reminded me of how young I was and how much I did not deserve to be where I was almost on a daily basis. And so I went through, it was about a year that I was at that facility before I got my own club. But she had lots of conversations about how she was going to keep me back, that I didn't really deserve to have my own location yet because I was so young and I hadn't put in as many years as her. And she had been with the company for a very long time. And it was interesting because it was such a sad place, number one, to be her right hand. I was literally, as an assistant general manager, you are the general manager when they go on vacation, when anything's needed. And so I was this big support system for her to have this amazing life. She was, her boyfriend was like this bodybuilder and traveled to competitions, and she was able to go whenever. But she also took advantage. And I realized this as an older professional now. But she took advantage of me, and, she booked me for Thanksgiving, and she'd book me on holidays. I remember, so I had to work Thanksgiving. I was the only person that didn't have family in New York City. So I traveled to Pennsylvania the day before on a bus, which is not fun, from Port Authority, into the Poconos. And then the day of Thanksgiving, I had my little get together with my family. I was going back to do payroll and all of those things within the facility. And then I remember the same year, New Year's Eve, I was booked. And it was interesting because I showed up, if I was sick. I had the flu once. I don't know why anybody would want you around members, but I was called in, and I remember being there with a winter coat, a scarf, a hat, because I was so cold with such a high fever, sitting there doing the work so that I could close the facility and she could leave. And so I wasn't bitter at the time, which is really interesting. When I think back, it was like, well, this is how I kind of grin and bear it. This is how I'm going to up level my career. And these are the things I have to do to get ahead. And now I think about it as someone who, I teach workshops on how to set boundaries, right? So it's very interesting to have had these experiences, but I also realized that she was one of my best advocates, right? So she was a catalyst for me blowing the roof off my career. It was having to find creative ways to work through that, to work through just the emotional toll, but also the work that I had to do. She gave me general manager stuff to do. So I learned super quick. I was getting mentorship just because she wanted me to do everything for her, which I took full advantage of. And so being able to reframe that for myself allowed me to want more. And I think if I had gotten caught up in the emotion, because I work with a lot of professionals making career transitions, right? And a lot of them are leaving toxic work environments. And in this culture right now in the marketplace, you have a lot of toxic work environments because, people are either coming back to the office, they're being micromanaged because you have managers that have never managed remote teams, like all of these weird nuances that we've never had in bulk.
Right.
And I hear a lot of the discontent, but that fuels them to halt their career, to just want to jump ship without a plan or understanding why they want to jump ship. And I'll say this is, I always ask when someone says, I want to leave a toxic work environment, I want a complete change, and they're looking for something else in their career, and I want a new role. And I always ask this question. So before you ever make a career move, if you're coming from a toxic work environment and you're like, I'm burnt out on this work, you have to ask yourself, are you leaving the environment and that job would be awesome? Or are you just completely burnt on the job, the duties, the attributes of what needs to happen there?
Right.
Independent of the environment you're coming from. And once you answer that question, making that next move is a lot easier, because then you're not running away from an environment, making yourself have to do a 180 move, which is difficult, right? And this is what we coach on a daily basis. So I see all the really interesting career moves. But understanding that question first of, am I leaving the environment and I would be fine doing the role, or am I leaving all of it? And that to me, all of my moves, it was never the work. It was always the environment. I need a new environment, or I need another opportunity for growth. And this is what I have envisioned for next. And so that's really propelled me in all of my career decisions.
Yeah, that's great. And so again, another key point on what elite performers do, they look at the entire picture, and maybe a good performer or not so good performer maybe they're a good person, they're performing, but then they get called in on Thanksgiving, they get called in on New Year's, and they then say, that's it, I'm leaving. And they get out without looking at what they're also able to gain. I'm not saying that kind of behavior by the leader is acceptable or not. It probably depends, because nobody is perfect, and you're not going to find. I'm an imperfect leader. Everybody else that I know that I've worked for is an imperfect leader. Some are better than others. Some are elite. Some are not so good. But what the elite do is they look at the total picture and say, okay, well, this might be a price or the cost of building my arsenal up for the future. And that's what you did. And I think that's really fantastic as well. I got a question here from Gary in the UK, who is saying, it's a great question, setting personal boundaries and dealing with or working through adversity. Have the two ever crossed over? So you set your boundaries and then adversity happens. Yes. Have you found that they've crossed over?
Yeah. Yes. So as a mom, so I'm a mom of two. I run my own business. I also do coaching and consulting externally as well. And so that constantly butts up against each other, right? So what I think a lot of entrepreneurs find is when they're starting their own business, they're so afraid to say no, or, oh, I can't do that time. And it comes back to how you set boundaries. And so I love that question, because I think this is the big miss when people set boundaries. You don't know why you're setting it. You know the why in terms of, I don't want to be asked to work after 5 o'clock or whatever it may be. Okay.
Right.
But that's not the fuel, right? The fuel for me is it's hurting a core value. So my core value that's getting hurt is family, right? So I really enjoy my family and my kids and my husband. And I love that family time. It's very important to me. And so when I do boundary setting, and I do an entire workshop on this, and I have kind of a freebie that we have on our new website that's actually launching in a couple of weeks. But it's you have to define your core values first, right? So you have to understand what is super important to you, and is it negotiable or is it not, right? So is there a hard line in the sand? If you have a hard line in the sand for family, you'll always understand, one, how to say no, and two, why you're saying it. And so if you don't define that, then when you say no, this is what happens to every professional. They feel guilty.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I said no, and oh, I don't want to upset them. I don't want to, lose out on my promotion, right? So these are the constant conversations that are going on behind the scenes after we set the boundary, right? And so when we set boundaries, we should always account for adversity. You are always going to run across someone who's like, no, you need to come in. No, I need to speak to you at 6:30 tonight. No, that to me is like confrontation at its best. And so if we understand why we're doing it and we're consistent in being able to say no, you'll realize those people start to die down. Like that noise starts to go away. And if it doesn't go away, it's an amazing opportunity because it's a red flag for you. You realize, wow, there's no respect in this workplace. There's no understanding of who I am outside of work, right? Because we've crossed the boundary enough. So I do think like there's beauty in that adversity because it teaches you the lesson on, is this healthy or is this not? And if it's consistently not healthy, I think it helps to make the decision to leave.
It does. And, one of the, as you well know, Briar, and for those of you outside the United States where something called the Great Resignation is not happening at this point. It's very much U.S. centric, but places like Australia are starting to see signs of the same thing happening there. One of the, I'll just give an example. You've got single mothers that where the employer during the pandemic they set up a Zoom meeting for 8:00 at night, not taking into account what that mother is doing at 8:00 at night, right, to take care of her baby. And these kind of things are just way off the mark, right? So I think this is wonderful advice that you're giving here as well. So Gary's happy with that answer. Thank you, Gary, for asking. Thank you, Briar. It's an exceptional answer as well. Padre, thanks for all the comments. Padre is a big fan of yours now, Briar. So I've got several messages you can read later. But Padre, thank you as well. And but specifically, he likes the fact that you are always looking at the bigger picture, and basically that will kind of keep you going if you do it that way, instead of giving up or deciding to develop an attitude and focus on just the negative and not the positive. So that's invaluable advice as well. Okay, Briar. So we've got 15 minutes left. What I want to do, I do want to talk about ATS, et cetera. But before we do that, if you could kind of accelerate things a little bit and kind of talk about when you went from corporate America into solopreneurship, what was the deciding factor to do that? And then I'd also love for you to quickly talk about when you moved from New York City to Atlanta, which is, for those of you that have not been to the United States, those are like moving to two totally different
one
countries,
requires
right?
a car and one does not. So that was
there you go. That's a big difference, right?
Well, so if I can reverse those and then I can go into it.
Sure, absolutely.
So I was a regional director for a salon and spa company based out of Saks Fifth Avenue. And so I ran the entire Northeast region, was managing this multi-million-dollar P&L, doing hiring, firing, all these really great things. I was 25 when I became a regional director. And so I had all of these really great experiences. I was working directly with Saks Fifth Avenue executives. I was creating partnerships with local hotels. I was traveling all the time. And I got burnt out. I was over it. I had this amazing apartment in Manhattan and was never there. I literally would be traveling 3 weeks. I'd come home for a weekend and then I'd go and do it again. And this is when I had no boundaries, right? So like, these are all really great learnings that I went through as a young professional to now teach others. So when I got burnt out, I started looking for other jobs. And at that time in my corporate career, I was working for an organization. It was a vendor through Saks Fifth Avenue, and they fired my boss, who was the VP over my half of the country. And I fired her on a plane. And they had her go out to, I think it was California, to open up this new region and a couple of different locations. And on the plane ride back, after she had done all that work, they fired her.
Oh,
and
goodness.
I loved my boss, and she was amazing. We actually had the best region in the entire company. I mean, like profitability, revenue, the whole deal. And I knew the axe or the hammer, whatever gadget was coming my way, arrow, whatever it was, some sort of weapon was then aimed at me. And I knew I'd probably be losing my job. And so I was like, this is time to like completely reset myself and what I want to do and where I want to be. And I'd always had this inclination that maybe it was like nicer and less volatile in the South. And so I found a role, I interviewed, I flew down to Atlanta twice, and I got offered the position the day that my company let me go.
Wow.
So I got off the phone call, got off, looked at my email. My email had just been shut down. My boss comes down, and I was like, well, are you going to fire me here? Or are we going to go out of Saks to do this? And she was like, oh. I was like, what? Like, let's get this going, you know?
Yeah,
like,
let's do it.
An offer. So I bought a car within like the next week or so, packed whatever I could in the car and drove down to Atlanta. And I got to Atlanta, and this is the really interesting part of my story is, I got to Atlanta and they decided they wanted to open the DC market before the Southeast market. And so they were going to move me up to DC for like 6 to 12 months and then move me back to Atlanta. And I had been in New York City during 9/11, right? And I was like, I don't really want to be near the nation's capital. I don't know. For some reason, I just had this like, no, thank you.
Yeah,
so
I hear you.
I turned down the offer. So now I'm in Atlanta. I have a car.
No job. Yep.
No job. And I'm living in this place that I only had a 1-month lease because I didn't know where to live. And so I got another apartment with no job, because try and get an apartment when you don't have a pay stub to show anyway. And I landed a new role and kind of rebuilt my career in Atlanta. And so by the time I was ready to kind of venture off, I was working with an advertising firm, large advertising firm. I was working right underneath the president, and I was doing sales. I was doing production. It was in, advertising marketing, really enjoying it. But then I got pregnant, and I left work, had my son, and the whole goal was, childcare, work. I'm going to keep working full time, and I couldn't do it. And so I spoke to my husband. I had some coaching clients on the side. I had been doing resume writing, getting really great results with that, but just doing it kind of for fun.
Right.
And I said, what do you think? What do you think about this? And he was like, I know you and you're a workhorse. So like you can make anything work. And he ended up getting some promotions that I helped him with to really be the sustainable figure in our household. So I could build a business. And so, so the solarpreneurship started just haphazardly, like, hey, I don't want to go back to corporate America. I love being here with my son. And then, we had some like hiccups in between that. When my son was 1, I was diagnosed with cancer, had surgery for that, lost my voice during that whole fiasco, which meant I couldn't coach. I had a paralyzed vocal cord, got my voice back, started coaching more after that. Ended up working with a really great client who's a former NFL player, and really developed all these cool relationships and started expanding my markets. And it just organically grew into Career Organic, which I incorporated in 2018. So it was really a passion for coaching that led me to want to be that support system for other professionals. And having had so many years of building teams and listening to what that meant for them, that other voice and how to support them as a manager, but then also have that compassion piece, which I will say cancer brought me, kids brought me. I had a miscarriage in between my daughter and my son, like all of those really hard trials and tribulations health-wise made me so compassionate. And so as my business grew, I felt like I could coach most people that have been through adversity because, I moved markets and knew no one and had to start over, lost my job, knew I was going to get fired, was targeted as a young professional,
Right.
tons of health stuff, which was just crazy to go through. And then to be on the other side of that, being able to teach it, but also reframe it for myself that these all happened as a part of lessons that now have given me something that I can give back.
Right.
And so really, like, me not going back to corporate America just spiraled all of these really neat things for me, but also now I get to touch the lives of other professionals, both in group settings, as well as just individual one-on-one coaching that I get to do.
Definitely. I mean, you just said a lot right there, and thank you for sharing that. But I think that's important, and it really, to me, adds to your credibility, having gone through the grind and the agony of many of the things that you just talked about at a very young age, and then still a young age even after that, right? I mean, and you're still young today, right? So, I mean, you've had an amazing life, but would you say, Briar, that adversity, if you hindsight analysis, has been your friend?
Oh, 100%. Oh, I say that very passionately. Adversity has allowed me to have several growth moments. And there's a famous saying, like, there's no growth without challenge, right?
Right.
And so every challenge has been, but I've taken it as such, right? So challenge can come and we can fall into the abyss of the challenge, or we can allow ourselves to grieve and go through those emotions. Cause I did, I went through those, when I lost my voice, like, you're told only 5% of people, literally before the surgery, only 5% of people have a paralyzed vocal cord after this surgery. I'm like, no worries. I'm one of the 5%.
You're one of the 5%.
Right.
Yep.
And so that was, I did go through grieving, for probably a week. And then I was like, this is ridiculous. I'm going to get my voice back. And I remember even having the adversity there because the doctors and the nurses that were a part of my rehab, I said, I'm going to get it back in 2 months. Right. And I couldn't talk. So like, I'm like writing this fun stuff because you have no voice, literally. And I ended up having a little like procedure done to plump up one of my vocal cords so something could vibrate against it. And so I was able to kind of speak a little bit. I was like, it's going to be back. And they're like, honey, don't do that to yourself. Don't shoot for the moon when this really doesn't happen for anybody. And so this is what's being told to me by these medical professionals. And I kind of gave them the bird. It was like, no, thanks. That could be true for everybody else,
not accepting
but it's not going to be true for
Yeah.
me. And literally 2 months later, I ended up having my voice back. And so all of those things, one, gave me opportunity to grow. Two, gave me an opportunity to be proud of myself. And I think there's a balance that people have to have, because I work with a lot of humble and servant leaders, and they don't want to be proud of themselves. Like they do, but they don't. There's like this internal battle that's happening. And I often talk to this where you have to allow those moments, those wins. You have to be proud of the accomplishments you've overcome, but then you use it, right? Like you use it for good. It doesn't just sit there and build your ego. You're able to propel it into the market. You're able to give back. You're able to volunteer. You're able to be a thought leader, whatever those things are that you want from it. You're able to take it that step forward. And so I think there's something there that a lot of leaders need to recognize is you are allowed to have those proud moments, but just utilize it correctly.
Absolutely. And, people should engage with you separately. We'll talk about how they can do that in a few minutes. But because you've been through these choppy, highly volatile, life impacting situations before, right? And I think that is the best way to learn. And once a person has learned that, that's the best teacher for other people as well, Briar. So you are an amazing person. This is so great. Now, let's move on in the remaining minutes. I'd like to talk briefly about how to get through ATS, what it is in 15 seconds and maybe in 90 seconds. Tell people how you and your business help people turn this ATS into an asset.
Sure. So the ATS is the applicant tracking system. And so there are different names. You could find Workday, Talio. So if you've probably heard of one. And what it does is that when you apply online, it actually scans your resume. It compares it to the job posting. And so there's keywords in your job posting you're looking at. So if it's sales, they're looking for sales on your resume. But it doesn't just look for the word. It looks for how many times it's used. And so it rates you. What this is doing is helping recruiters very easily sift through 250 to 500 applicants at a time. You have to realize if you're going for a Fortune 500 company, they are using one of these systems, and it is because it helps them sort. So how do you get past this infamous machine? So for our business, we actually have a very systematic approach. So in order to start resume writing, you first have to have a target. So we will not start any writing for you if you do not have a target. You have to understand what type of roles are you going to apply to. Then we want those roles. So they don't have to be the roles you're going to apply to. It's what type of roles. So you give us those links. We actually take those and we scan it against your current resume or nothing. And we'll scan and we'll actually get a list of keywords. And so what my team does then, because this is how I teach it, and this is how I teach in the market as well, is you look at those scans and you look for all your high level duplicates. So if sales is on every single one, we need sales in that resume. If product management is in every single one, we need product management. And then we go down from there, right? And so there's a really fun hack that you can do on your own. There is free word cloud generators online. So you can Google it, word cloud, okay? And you can actually take a job description, you can put it in there. What happens with a word cloud is that the larger the word is, the more it's been repeated. And so it automatically tells you in a really pretty form what those keywords are for that job posting, and you can create that change in the resume before you apply. And so we do ATS first, then we're writing for the recruiter. So the recruiter, you want, your titles to be very clear. You want that left column to be really, and I don't use columns, but that left view, you want those titles bold. You want to be able to see your career trajectory because they're looking at it really quickly. Using descriptors underneath the role as well could also help because it tells the story very quickly. They don't have to read all your bullets. And then the bullets come in your summary section is for the hiring team, which is your third audience. So we're really looking at from start to finish when we're looking at the resume, but it all starts with that target. And so the ATS, our goal is making sure that you're not getting the auto bots, you're not getting the auto rejections, and that you're actually getting a recruiter to contact you.
Right. Yeah, that's fantastic. And this is the reality. You get a lot of people that are afraid of the ATS and they don't like it. And they wonder what in the world's going on, et cetera, et cetera. But that's reality, right, Briar? I mean,
it is,
and it's going to be around.
But you also have to think what it does for you as a good candidate who has all the keywords and all the experience is that if you're number 500, you still have a chance. But if they didn't have an ATS, if you're number 25, you might not have a chance because they're tired. They're manually going through all those applications.
Right. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And, the way that we used to do that, we used to look, I tell you the way I used to do it. I mean, I've reviewed thousands of resumes, but we didn't have ATS back then, but there was still a method to sort out the ones that didn't look attractive, to be interviewed. Right. And so ATS is a more rapid way, maybe a robotic way, but you have to upgrade with the times, right? Just
That's
like
right.
you upgrade your iPhone software.
But to your
Yeah, go ahead.
point, though, you
Yep.
don't have to make it super. Everybody thinks it has to be the best looking document ever
Right.
created, right? And it
Yep.
doesn't. If the ATS is working, then it's going to pull the keywords. And as long as your story,
Right.
matches the void that they're trying to fill by having that posting, you
Right.
may have a better chance. So it doesn't have to
Absolutely.
be, completely pretty and designed and all of that to get through the ATS. You actually don't want it. You don't want a lot of objects on your resume to pass the ATS.
Right. Exactly. Good. Fantastic. Briar, thank you. So what is the best way for people to get hold of you to engage with you and find out more about what you do?
Well, on this platform on
Yep.
LinkedIn, I'm an avid LinkedIn user. So
Hmm.
love to connect on LinkedIn.
Yep.
DM me. I have an open profile so you can connect without an email.
Yep.
And if you have any issues on, thoughts on this or questions about your career or what next step is, I have an entire team underneath me as well. We are all committed to helping professionals, but that is the best way to reach me. Yeah.
LinkedIn. Yep. Great. Fantastic. So we'll make sure that we get that really clear in the comments when I repost this discussion. And but Briar, I'd like to, we're a little bit over time now, but thank you very much for an inspiring conversation and for really talking about much of the adversity that you went through at a young age and how that actually became your friend and made you into a very strong businesswoman where you can help other people in an adverse world today. So it's just a phenomenal, you're a phenomenal person. I'm highly impressed. Thank you.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, great. It's great to have you. And thanks to all of you for your engagement, for tuning in today. I look forward to seeing you all again on Friday. Details will be announced tomorrow, but I'll be moving the cameras over to Nigeria, where I'll introduce a very special leader to you on Friday. So for now, thanks very much. Have a great evening if you're in Europe, and a great afternoon if you're in the United States and Asia. I'm expecting to hear from a lot of you in the comments section when you have a chance to see the replay of